Hello, and welcome to the Soul Shaking Love podcast. This podcast is dedicated to bringing you expert teachers to feel a mind, body, and spirit connection, both with yourself and with your true love. I'm your host, Love Coach Valerie Green from CoachValerieGreen.com. And today I am really excited to interview marriage and family therapist Kristal DeSantis about bringing strong relationships, building strong relationships, cultivating emotional safety and lasting connection, which is my favorite thing to talk about. So hello, Kristal.
Hi, thanks for having me. Yes, I'm excited too. This is one of my favorite topics as well.
Yes. And we were chatting beforehand about her book and how, strong is an acronym. So let me read a little bit about Kristal and about her book and about her methodology, because I don't know that a lot of you have heard of her yet, but she's a real gem because I just get a read for people's energy. And as soon as I felt Kristal's, as soon as I saw her book and I felt her mission, I could just tell we'll actually have a hard time not going too deep and keeping it to an hour. So let me tell you a little bit about her and then we will dive in. So Kristal DeSantis is the author of the book Strong, which is a relationship field guide for the modern man. And I love that because I haven't interviewed that many people on how from a male perspective, how to create secure attachment and how to really build strong, resilient relationships. And Strong is a model of relational therapy. It's a framework designed to help people experience secure, fulfilling relationships by enhancing emotional intelligence, understanding attachment styles, and deepening relational connection. And so, as she was saying, it's a real step-by-step field guide because, I don't have gender stereotypes, but I teach about masculine, feminine energy. And for the masculine energy in all of us, we want practical tools. We want practical steps. This is how you do it. Step 1, step 2, step 3. And that is what Strong seems to be about. So I am so excited to pick Kristal's brain to shorten the learning curve for all of you.
Yay. Yeah, thank you. Absolutely. And that is something that, for my own journey in becoming a marriage and family therapist, but also for somebody who is looking for the formula for love in myself, I just found that there is so much out there that can sometimes be a little bit overwhelming. There's so much great material out there, but I found that for a lot of people, it can just be like, where do I even start? And so that's part of why I wanted to create this really simple book as a field guide, just some basic guidelines, basic pillars of what to look for if you're on your path to creating a strong and healthy relationship. So that's why I kind of broke it down into these pillars of what a healthy relationship looked like. Luckily, it kind of came in this beautiful little acronym, STRONG. And yeah, that's what I work with couples. That's what I teach. That's what my book is about. And yeah, I'm happy to go through it step by step if you're ready.
Yes, I know. I love the acronym. I love the word strong, just because it's the connotation, especially for men, that if you're strong, that you have to be, kind of standing your ground and knowing what you want, but not necessarily stopping to feel your feelings or to have empathy for the other person's point of view, because you have to keep plowing forward. And so I love that you're kind of repurposing the word.
Yeah, yes. And I really did that very deliberately because, like you mentioned, I think there's this idea out there that going to therapy is the stigma for a long time was that it was a sign of weakness, right? It's like you couldn't figure things out on your own. You needed to go somewhere where, you would cry on a couch and a therapist would tell you how amazing you are and everything's okay. And I was like, that's not been my experience of going to therapy. Going to therapy afterwards feels like I just did a really hard workout at the gym.
Yes.
Like that was not fun and cozy. Like it was tough. And so that's really what I wanted to, when I created my practice, my passion population was veterans and first responders. So again, I wanted a word that's like, going to therapy is not weak. It's the strongest thing you can do if you really realize that you've kind of come to the end of where you can help yourself. Is, it's, if anything, it's, I'm not giving up on me. I'm accessing other people who can take me to the next level, right? And so I really wanted to come from that strength-based perspective of like, no, you are going to be working out. This is going to be your emotional gym here, and you're going to leave, after the work with me, feeling emotionally stronger, stronger within yourself and also in your relationships. So, yeah, that was the plan, and so far it's been working out.
Yeah, I love that. So yeah, why don't you dive in and break down strong
Yeah.
and what does it stand for and what are these pillars?
Yeah. So again, I wanted something that was, not relationships. You can't have a one size fits all. So I wanted to just say, like, what are the basic pillars of what a healthy relationship is, right? And so I'm also a trauma trained therapist. I do EMDR. I also do sex therapy with couples. And so that was something that really stood out to me, is that a healthy relationship always starts with safety.
Hmm.
Right. And so that's the S of the strong model, is we got to start with figuring out what helps these people feel safe. So secure attachment, safe in their bodies, safe in their relationship, emotional safety, obviously physical safety, but safety as the foundation for any healthy relationship is absolutely step one.
Hmm.
So that's the S. The T is trust, which, a lot of couples, when I do couples therapy, people come in because, maybe there's been some kind of trust violation, or they're having trouble trusting each other or rebuilding trust after a betrayal. And a lot of people focus on, trusting each other and trusting your partner. But again, if we don't have safety, you can't trust. You can't trust anybody you don't feel safe with, right?
Right,
Um,
exactly.
but once we have that safety piece, then we can start working on trust. And trust is where I talk about in my book of attachment, right? It's like some of us grew up in homes where we didn't have secure attachment with our parents. That was not modeled for us. And so internally, there is a little bit of a question. Can we trust anybody, right? Is the world safe? Are other people safe? And so building trust in a relationship, I really talk about it kind of from that attachment based perspective, is, the world may not be safe and there may be a lot of unsafe people in it, but what do you need in this relationship to form a secure attachment to this person that you are building a life with,
Yeah,
right? So the attachment in the bond, trust in the bond that you've created, right?
I love
um,
that because I completely agree. You can't really trust, most people that you who haven't earned your trust yet. But if you're in
exactly.
a romantic relationship, then you can build that trust together. And everybody needs something different based on our past and our programming
Exactly.
to feel trust. And so, yeah, that's a really good framework.
Yeah, and I also talk about that, the difference between belief and trust, right? I think so often we, have this romantic idea that if you love someone, you're just supposed to believe them. And, when I come from that attachment based perspective, I'm like, no, love is consistency and predictability, and, that earning that trust, right?
Mm-hmm.
Over time. Consistency over time builds the bonds of trust. It's not just this idea that, well, when you love someone, you should believe them. And if you don't believe them, then something is very wrong. Like, that's
Mm-hmm.
not how humans work at all.
Right,
Right.
exactly. And trust also has many components to it, as you know, right? You can trust somebody that they mean well, but that doesn't mean that you trust that they have the skills to be able to meet your emotional needs, let's say, and those skills can be learned. And so, I imagine that you have a framework to break that down.
Mhm. Absolutely, because that is such a common thing. I actually have it in my book. It's called Mind the Gap, because when I was traveling in London, that was something that I heard. I don't know if been on the subway or the underground in London, and you're in New York, so they talk about mind the gap, right? It's like,
Right,
be aware
exactly.
of where you are and where you want to be, and recognize there's a gap that you might fall into if you don't have the skills to take that step from one to the other. right?
Right. And so noticing like these are my skills and these are where I want to go. And this is what the other person needs from me in order to feel emotionally safe. And then here's the skills that we need to learn to get there. Right. That's probably
Exactly.
all
Yeah.
broken down. And that's wonderful because I think that to talk about safety too, um,
Mhm.
you said obviously physical safety, which all of us I think understand that if we don't feel physically safe in a relationship, that it's a no-go. But a lot of times, I know Alison Armstrong talks a lot about this. When women say we feel unsafe, we mean that we feel emotionally unsafe, meaning that I think that I'm going to be judged or dismissed for my feelings. And most men don't understand that feels actually emotionally unsafe because men don't like that either. Men have feelings and they don't want to feel dismissed or judged for their feelings, but they don't necessarily say, I feel unsafe.
Mhm.
When their feelings aren't acknowledged, they would say that they feel disrespected usually. But it's like
Exactly.
they don't necessarily know. Like, this is what we need to feel safe. And so I love that you define that. Do you want to speak a little bit more to
Yeah. Well, and that's part of the reason why, like, as a woman writing this book for men, it was kind of that window, that for women, building a healthy romantic relationship, it does start with that sense of safety, right? And so I think there's been some, discourse out there in social media where guys, they can feel very like affronted with the idea that like women don't feel safe with us. What's that about, right? But
Mhm.
again, really breaking it down to that, like the emotional safety component is so crucial. But then, yeah, you bring up another point. The R in strong is respect, because
Mhm.
for so many men, it was, well, then, it's a no go for me if I don't feel respected.
Right.
But I talk about kind of breaking it down between, there's self respect, right? And then demanding respect in a relationship when you're not asking for respect for your humanity, you're asking for respect of your authority. And
Mhm.
that's where I see couples get into kind of a power struggle where, in a healthy relationship, we respect each other's autonomy, our humanity. And that's very different than what men have often over years been taught, that if a woman respects your authority, then that's kind of the key of a good, strong relationship or a good, strong man.
Right.
And so just really redefining that, like you said, of, men want to feel seen and heard and respected and acknowledged in their relationships. And, maybe we call it respect, right? Respect for their humanity and their human experience. And then for women, maybe we call it safety. But ultimately, these kind of crucial elements, safety, trust, and respect, are really the foundation of any healthy relationship.
Yes, I completely agree. As the first half of strong, the STR. And with respect, I completely agree. I think respect has traditionally been talked about with respecting authority, but that was when we had hierarchical relationships. And so then when we thankfully moved in the direction of everyone's equal, we all have different ways of defining respect. And it sounds like what you're saying is respecting that my experience is different than your experience and letting you have your experience, not trying to tell you what to do, not trying to change how you feel, which for most women, right? Obviously, I respect all genders. And so it's a huge spectrum. There's cis women, there's trans women, there's cis men, there's trans men, right? So it's like we're just mostly talking about masculine energy men and feminine energy women, but obviously it's there's a lot of variety. But I've found that most women would call that emotional safety, and you're right, most men would call that respect, but it kind of translates to that same experience that my feelings are accepted by the other person, my reality is different than the other person, and that's okay. We can respect each other's differences, or for the feminine person, I feel cherished for my feelings, is kind of.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's also where, and so in the chapter on respect, I also talk about boundaries, right?
Mhm.
Is that in a healthy relationship, we respect the interdependence of the relationship, right? Like you are your own person with your own boundaries, and so is your partner. And codependence and becoming like one like entity, right? And I call it
Mhm.
like the couple blob, is
Yes.
not the goal, right? And so, how can you respect somebody's autonomy and independence and still be in a healthy relationship with them, right? It's that collaboration, it's the working together and saying, how can we have a mutually respectful dialogue here?
Yes, I love that analogy of like the blob, the metaphor, because it's a very poignant metaphor when you're just like, this person has to be the same as me. And, obviously, like I've never met anybody that consciously believes that. It's unconscious that
Yeah,
if I'm codependent, which me and my husband are both formerly codependent, so I can really relate to that, is like, no, you can't be upset because then that means that I did a bad job. And it's like, wait a minute, you have your experience, you have your feelings and needs. If I'm
mhm,
taking that personally, then I can't give you empathy and respect your feelings and needs. So
absolutely. Yeah. And it goes in so many, I mean, like there's so many different layers there, right? Just I talk about also the assumption of similarity trap, the idea that our soulmate is going to be so much like us. They can finish our sentences, they can read our mind. And it can, I mean, that's a trap that a lot of people fall into, because then what do you do when your partner has a different opinion than you? What do you
right.
do if your partner has a different experience than you? If your assumption is that you're supposed to be the same, right? So, yeah, respecting differences, respecting boundaries is really crucial. And so, in my model, the STR is really in my book too. I divide it into like, these are the survival skills. So if you're looking to just learn how to survive and build a healthy relationship, like your relationship will not survive if you don't have safety, trust, and respect.
Right.
But once we kind of get through that, we're good, we got that, then we can move to the ONG part, which is really about thriving, which is really about taking your love to that next level. And so the O is for openness, right? Recognizing that growth will continue to happen, and making room for that in the relationship, right? Like the people that you are, maybe when you first meet, are not going to be the people in 10, 20, 15, however many years. Life is going to change. Maybe you're going to move. Maybe you're going to change jobs. Maybe you're going to, add family members, pets, children, maybe whatever, you're going to retire. So having a relationship that's open enough that you can continue to try on and explore different parts of your identity without having to feel like your relationship is rigidly attached to a specific version of you is
Right.
so crucial, right?
Yes. And I imagine that's also openness about, um, you know, I like to talk about the difference between inspiring or kind of like intimacy kind of vulnerability versus victim vulnerability. If I'm like I always acting like a victim and I'm feeling upset or sad about that, of course, in a healthy relationship with emotional safety, the person would give you empathy for that, right? But at the same time, I imagine what you mean by openness is this intimacy kind of revealing about my dreams and my
Yes.
values and being vulnerable in a way where it inspires the other person to see um our deepest dreams and our purpose and all of that feels really vulnerable.
Yeah, yeah. And that's really where I see, the healthiest couples, when they go through those kinds of changes or those realizations in life, they can share those things with their partner. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, they have other friendships, but their relationship is that place where they can be open and explore these other different parts of themselves that have started to come up. Um, in unhealthy relationships, that's often where I see people start to grow apart, is
Right.
because they feel like their partner is attached to a certain version of them. And so the growth they do is like behind the scenes or in secret until one day they can't hide it anymore. And then now it's the reveal, and then the relationship is over.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, I know, and it's really sad when that happens, just because if you had more of the openness throughout, but people don't realize how to do that, then
Mm-hmm.
that could be avoided, and you could have more shared understanding and shared reality along the way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's really crucial for thriving, right? A relationship thriving into the future. And then the N is nurturing.
Mm.
And that was one of my favorite chapters to write because, of course, I'm writing this book for men, and this is one of the biggest myths, right? That like men are not nurturing, women do that kind of stuff. Men are about maintenance, women are about nurturing. And so breaking that down into dispelling some of the myths around what is nurturing, right? Nurturing is just caring for something that's alive, right? Maintenance is kind of like you're checking a box on, a checklist. Whereas when you're actually invested in your relationships, in your children, in your friendships, you care about nurturing them more than just, all right, I called that friend, check, don't have to talk to them for another 6 months, right? Yep, kiss the wife today, and this kind of, which, as we all know, that's not what feels nurturing in a relationship, right? It's the little things. And so really, there's so much research in there also about the importance of a present parent, especially when it comes to fatherhood. Like in the past, a lot of men were and I talk about in the very beginning of the book, of men were kind of relegated to these three P's: the protector, the provider, and the procreator, right? It's like if you were a masculine man, like you could do these three things, that's what your family wanted from you, like protect them, provide financially, and then give your wife a baby if she wants it. And so really kind of redefining that of like, what does it mean to actually be a nurturing, present parent who
Mm.
provides maybe emotional security, who provides intimacy, who provides fun, who protects your family in other ways by, showing up in different environments and, protecting from, oh, I don't know, bullying from with your kids, teaching them how to protect themselves. So just in so many different ways, how these kind of tropes of masculinity that have kind of rigidly defined the male experience for so long can really be adapted and reinvented so that it is a much more fulfilling, whole, holistic, heart-centered human experience. And that really is that nurturing piece of like, who do you want to be in the relationship? What feels authentic to you? How do you want to show up in nurturing your friendships, your marriage, your children, and all of that? So,
I love
yeah.
that. That sounds like really great questions because I think that, most men that I talk to would agree that they don't want to be stuck in that, yeah, three P's archetype. They
Yeah.
they see themselves as more nurturing and they want to be seen as, not just protecting in the traditional way, but like teaching their children how to be emotionally strong, for example. And so I think that, but they might not necessarily know how to define that or know how to wrap their minds around it or even how to do it. And so it sounds like that what your book has the step by step questions to help them figure out.
Yeah. And I think also just um, kind of maybe naming that if you can call it nurturing, like it's okay to be a nurturing man. If anything, that's actually really a lot of women crave from their partners, is feeling that kind of cherished and nurtured energy coming from, again, even though you're in your masculine, you might be, in so many other ways presenting in these more stereotypic, maybe masculine ways, but the nurturing can also be a very grounding and very calming and like really just fulfilling energy.
Yeah, yeah. I love that. I mean, I certainly feel that in my relationship and I we do call it nurturing, but it's so sweet to break out of old stereotypes. So I love that
Yeah.
you're inventing the word.
Yeah, and then the final piece is generosity. So that's the G of strong, and that's kind of where, I think, when I talk about, and I looked at the research, and like even John Gottman talks about, the couples that really thrive and they're just in a good place. It's all of the little ways that they look to make the other person's life just a little bit better,
Yep.
right? It's that slightly generous mindset. It's like, there's no tip for tat. There's no scorekeeping. It's, I just know that this is going to make them smile. I'm going to send this picture to them, right? Or I found this meme and I'm just going to send it to them. Or I see the box of chocolates or the thing of flowers. And it's not a special occasion, but I just know that they would like it. So I'm going to bring it home to them, right? And having a relationship that has that, like, that what I call kind of the fairy dust, right? It's like you have all
Mhm.
these solid, like really tangible, practical things that you can, list out. And then generosity is the thing that just makes it feel like a warm and comforting and energetic place to be. Right?
Yeah. No, I love that. And I completely agree that, and I love the order in which you share things because when people feel safe and trusting and respected,
Exactly.
then that's what
Mhm.
cultivates this desire to be generous. And if we don't have
Absolutely.
safety, then we don't feel like we have the energy to be generous because we're
Mhm.
still focusing on self-regulating because we're not feeling safe in the relationship.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's also where, again, with a lot of the noise out there on social media or whatever, is sometimes there's an overemphasis on the generosity piece. Like, just be nice to your partner, just treat them the way you would want to be treated. Like, make each other, take each other on dates. And again, I'm like, it only works if there's this foundation there. Otherwise, that can lead to often a lot of people feeling burnt out, right? They're like,
Mhm.
I'm giving, 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 and I'm not really feeling like the essence is there. And so,
Exactly.
again, it's like that's the fairy dust, that's the cherry on the top. You got to start with safety.
Right, exactly. I love that. And so to piggyback on that, I know that there's a lot of people listening that probably feel like they're in that situation where maybe they don't have that emotional safety or they don't feel trust in their relationship. And maybe they're trying to be generous in order to create that foundation of respect and love, but then they feel burnt out. So, how does self love and self care fit into that paradigm?
Yeah. Kind of on both ends, but with safety, it's such a big word that I actually broke safety down into what I call the four S's of safety. And the first piece is self awareness, right?
Mhm.
Recognizing what you need in a relationship. Again, that self reflection on what kind of patterns or what kind of wounds you're bringing from the past into your current relationships. In what ways maybe are you looking for your partner to, save you from the pain of the past? And so that self awareness piece is so crucial in, again, even feeling emotionally safe within yourself so that you can then identify what that feels like to be loved safely in another person. And, again, that you can also be aware if they're looking at you to save them from their pain and, all of that stuff. So the self-awareness is step one with that. And then the second S is stability, which again, I've seen a lot of people where they kind of again, like maybe get ahead of themselves and trying to find stability in their partnership. And that's also where self love comes in. It's like, what would it look like to give yourself the life to be proud of and the stability of like, you work hard and then you give yourself a little vacation or you treat yourself well and you have the stability that your life feels like a safe and comforting place for you, right? Um, as opposed to, my life will start as soon as I find that person, or I'll take myself on that vacation as soon as I can go with someone, or, I'm just having that kind of starting with yourself. You can, self-awareness and stability. And then the last two is really also then what comes into play when it comes to communication and conflict skills, which is the skills of self-regulation, right? Feeling like you can bring yourself back to a place of safety in your own body, and then self-expression, finding ways that you can express yourself in a safe and connective way, right?
Mhm.
And so all of that is the, you know, starting with doing that for you so that you can then bring it into a relationship if you so choose.
Exactly. Yeah. And I love that answer because I think a lot of people try to be generous because they want the other person to be able to be emotionally present and meet their needs, but they're not able to communicate what they need. And so all of those skills that you just talked about allow us to be self-aware enough to communicate what we need in a collaborative way where we're respecting the other person's feelings and needs. And so that's what'll create the change.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And, when you can feel safe in yourself too, you will no longer be attracted to people who are unsafe, right? It's like that's part of often what I see of people repeating the same patterns just with different partners is, they're looking to kind of find the familiar cycle or whatever. It's familiar, but it's not safe. And, talking about all of that. And so then when you can really find that safety within yourself, then you can recognize when somebody, they might be like, they might like awaken that old pattern, right? It's like if you have a pattern of insecure attachment or kind of chaotic attachments, those people that awaken that in you may always feel slightly familiar, but you will no longer try to calm that chaos in them and find safety within yourself, you know?
Exactly. Yeah. Do you because I love what you're saying, and I feel like it might be a little confusing without an example. Do you have maybe an example of what it means to create safety in yourself, and then what it looks like to communicate from a place of safety versus to fall back into old patterns in a relationship?
Yeah. So I mean, this is also where in my therapeutic work, we often go back to kind of the core attachment wounds,
Yeah.
right? So, for example, if there is somebody who, grew up with a parent who was very critical or harsh, and they always felt like they had to seek the acceptance of that parent. What I see sometimes is people that are then attracted to partners who are, less affectionate, less giving, because it's a familiar pattern, right?
Yeah.
And so they end up in this cycle where they're constantly, again, kind of chasing that person's love. They're chasing their approval. And they realize, like, gosh, I'm burning myself out. I'm doing a lot of the work in the relationship. And this pattern, it feels familiar, but it's not quite getting me the fulfillment that I want in a healthy adult relationship. And so
Exactly.
part of that is breaking that down and, what is it? What is the love that you're seeking from the other person that you can actually start to cultivate within yourself? Whether it's, I don't feel worthy, I don't feel beautiful, I don't feel intelligent, I don't feel good enough. How can we start to work on those narratives within yourself so that you can feel like I am worthy, I am beautiful, I am intelligent, I am, enough, so that you're not constantly trying to get somebody else to prove that for you, right? And so again, that could be a lot of deep self work, but once you get to that place of like, I am worthy, I am enough, I do believe these things, then if you go back out into the world, into the dating field, and you find another person who kind of is that same like distant, critical, judgmental, not very available, you will realize like, oh, I don't need that anymore because I
Mhm.
have the resources that I need to know that I'm not going to chase that anymore. Right. And I'm going
Yeah,
to be to a different kind of partner, which is just lovely.
it really is. I know. It's kind of it seems like magic. Because I'm sure we've both worked with people who've had a dramatic shift like that. Like, wait a minute, the people that I'm attracted to are totally different. How did that happen? And it's
Oh, yeah.
doing the inner healing work where you're really giving to yourself what you thought you needed to get from others. Not that you don't need it, but then once you're able to give it to yourself and feel safer within yourself, then you'll be attracted to people who can also give it.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's kind of like, I don't know, this just, I love using analogies. I'm like, when you can cook for yourself, then you can, still enjoy when a friend cooks for you, but you're not starving until then.
Yes,
Right.
exactly, exactly. And then you're not going to settle for like, oh my God, I'm starving. I'm just going to eat junk food because
Yeah,
because you know
exactly.
how to cook for yourself, and then you
Mhm.
can make yourself food if there's food in your fridge, assuming. But you
Uh-huh.
don't have to be like, oh my God, the only thing open is fast food, and so I just need that.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a really good analogy. And then of course it also works if you're in a relationship. Like I notice that when I'm really triggered and I try to get what I need from my husband like in a triggered way, then a lot of times we're arguing. But if I'm able to self-soothe and create that
Mhm.
safety within myself, then I'm able to communicate with him in a way that doesn't trigger him.
Absolutely. And that's something else that I talk about in, the self-expression piece of safety is there when you can express yourself in a safe and connective way, there are no off-limit emotions. And
Mm.
that's something that I hear often for men is like, oh, I need to work on my anger. Oh, it's like, well, anger can be very important as a messenger, but yes, we do need to make sure that the expression of anger is not pushing people away or it's
Right.
not scaring them. But the essence of whatever brought up the anger may be really important too, if we can figure out a way to express it so that it's connective. Maybe it's I feel really lonely, or maybe I was really hurt by that, or maybe it's I have a need that's not being met, or a boundary was crossed and I'm really not okay with that. I need an apology. And so again, anger can be, or any emotion can be very informative, very connective if we learn to use them that way, as opposed to just like flinging them at each other, which often happens when we're triggered, or when we're not really paying attention to how can I use this emotion as fuel for connection, not fuel to burn this house down, right?
Yes, exactly. I actually really love the way that you said that, that any emotion is, I forget the word you use, but any emotion is acceptable and any emotion can lead to a deeper connection. It's not like there's any emotion that's off limits, because that is the definition of unsafety. We don't feel safe, at least women, and men usually don't feel respected if part of them is not welcome. But there's a difference between anger and aggression.
Absolutely.
The
Yeah.
difference between, as I said, like empowered vulnerability, which is intimacy. It's like I have a boundary that was crossed and we need to talk about it so that I feel respected. Can we talk about it? Because I know that you have needs too, and that's a safe way to talk about it, but I'm still angry. And so it's really beautiful.
Yeah. So again, it's not the be all end all, but hopefully kind of breaking it down into these different components of what a healthy relationship looks like. And then, some language. I talk about attachment, I talk about trauma. I have the emotion wheel in there. I've got some scripts on having, emotional or repair conversations. Can give, anybody who finds this book kind of a guide to navigating healthy relationship, at least, from a kind of field guide level. And then if they, of course, want to go deeper into any parts of it, if they want to get deeper into attachment work, into trauma work, into sex work, therapy, or, anything else, I have a bunch of resources in the back of my book that people can, continue their learning from there.
Yeah, and that's really wonderful. There's so much I'd want to talk to you about, including how to heal insecure attachment, although I think that would be the subject of a whole nother interview, and we're kind of coming to the end of our time. The question that is really jumping out at me is because I would say the majority of my audience is women, and there might be a lot of women that are listening to this saying, "Oh my gosh, I want to read your book, and then I want to inspire my boyfriend or husband to read it with me." But he's not really interested in reading relationship books. And so how do I get him to read it with me? And so what would you recommend?
Yeah. So I actually put it on audiobook as well. So it's on Audible. So that's something that I've learned. And a lot of men are more listeners than they are physical readers.
Yes.
But I often, so I do get that a lot, right? So the women who want to bond and have a healthier and stronger relationship with their husbands or their partners, or even to even know, like from the beginning of dating somebody. And that's always how I want to frame it is, I think so many men can be very defensive when it comes to like, oh, here's a book for you, or here's something. It's like, here's how you quote unquote fix yourself, which again, like that's not how healing works at all. And so instead, kind of having it be an invitation of like, I'd like us to explore some of the skills and tools on how I can understand you better, right? Because in the beginning of the book, I also talk about how, those tropes of masculinity, the 3 Ps, kind of keep men trapped in these different roles. And they might not even have the language to talk about that yet with their partners. And so I've heard from a lot of women who have read this book of like, oh my gosh, I never even thought about like how that must inform men's experience, that they're not allowed to show the vulnerability, that, maybe they were shamed for showing that, I can't protect you in this moment. I don't know how. And so just a little bit more of that, I want us to learn together. I want us to be on the same page. Because that's also what I talk to men about, where they're like, well, why'd you write it for men? I'm like, well, because there is so much out there for women, and that, I want men to feel empowered coming into, therapy or into those conversations with their partners. So that it can feel like an equal effort, right? Because that's often the complaint I hear from women is like, I have to do all the work. I'm the one out here doing all the reading, and he doesn't know what attachment styles are. He's never heard of any of this, and so this is part of what I offer to men as well, is like, finding the skills and tools that work for and speak to you, so that you can feel more empowered when you come into those conversations in your relationships, and you can really embody that strength, in that, you can work together and say, how can we build a strong relationship, because we both have access to the skills and tools that are out there and available.
Yeah, well, I love that. And it sounds like what you're saying is that if there's a woman who loves your book and wants to share it with her boyfriend or husband, to really talk about what she's learning from it. Like, oh my God, I didn't realize that these three P's were so operative. And I think it would be wonderful if I could hear more of your feelings. And this book is a real framework for how. And, so kind of like sharing her own vulnerability and openness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And there's some also just basic practical, scripts. And so again, as a woman, if you read it and you're like, see, I would love this, right? I would love if you would do this. And one of the things that I have in here that a lot of couples resonate with is the 4 positions of conversation, where I talk about how, again, we don't really overtly name it, but often the way that men are socialized to communicate is very much fixing and debating.
Right.
Which in my book are positions 3 and 4. And so, and when they're at odds with their partner, often when I kind of break it down is, often women are looking for positions 1 and 2, which is the listening and the joining, right? I just want to feel heard, and I want to feel validated and empathized with. And so, even just, I say, like, take a picture of that, or, put it on your fridge. And you can just say, like, hey, I would love if you would be in position 1 right now, because I have a lot that I would like to share. Yeah. So
I love that.
That's practical.
So practical. And I think, yes, if the women listening can find the sections of your book that are practical and then share those with the men that they're with, I think then that would be a wonderful way to talk about the book, because that usually when I work with couples, they just want practical skills and tools that they can use, where they don't have to reinvent the wheel. They can be like, okay, position 1 right now, and then they learn what that means, and then it's easy.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And I even have like a little empathy bingo square in here, because often what I hear from men is like, well, I feel the things, but I don't know what words to say. And it's like, just pick a square. It's like, I'm sorry you're feeling that right now. What's the other square? It's, I can imagine that must hurt, or, whatever. So again,
wow.
Just really easy to access the skills and tools and put them into practice right away.
I feel inspired hearing that, because there's so many. With me and my husband, like, I've actually had to tell him exactly the words that I want to hear when, he's giving me empathy, and vice versa. But the squares would be a really great reminder, because when both of us are triggered, it's hard to remember the words, and to have something right in front of us might help too. So I imagine that is very useful.
Yeah. That's the goal.
Yes, exactly. And then, gosh, I know that you've shared so much information. Do you want to, in a couple minutes, just talk about, like, perhaps what information do you share in the book about healing and secure attachment? Because I know that you do have information in there. And for people that identify already as having anxious attachment, I know that that's, in my practice, the type of insecure attachment style that tends to seek help the most, because, well, they're preoccupied with fixing the relationship, and that's a wonderful thing. And I love working with people with anxious attachment, because they're motivated to they have such a big heart and they're motivated to heal. And
Mhm.
so, and of course, I love working with avoidance too. It's just that like they need to be educated that feelings are important first.
Mhm.
So, do you want to talk about how your book helps people that identify as having insecure attachment?
Yeah, I think a big part of, well, hopefully, what I want to validate in here is, it's the attachment is in the bond, right? Because I feel like sometimes when I talk to people with insecure attachment, they have this shame that, I just need to heal it, or I need to act more avoidant, or, I need to do something so that I can be secure in a relationship by masking my anxious or insecure parts of myself. And really, what I often, is if you have that more anxious orientation, is you need more reassurance. And so
Mhm.
finding that in a relationship and having a safe enough partner that they will give you all the reassurance that you need, and how that's different, like asking for reassurance is different than control, right? And so that's something that I often talk about is, when you are with a partner who is emotionally available and able to give you the reassurance that you can ask for freely in the relationship, that's where, again, you may not ever change the default, but in the relationship, you can feel that secure attachment to this partner who's also invested in co-creating a secure bond with you.
Mhm.
Um, so that's often what it's like, we can't go back and rewrite the scripts that our parents gave us. We can't unfortunately go back in time, and there's definitely some inner child work and parts work that I love doing with people, where they are able to kind of go back and have a lot of compassion for those parts of themselves that didn't get the love and reassurance and security that they needed. But a big part of that is when you are in a relationship with a healthy and available partner, you don't have to work so hard anymore. All you have to do is ask for it. And a
Yeah,
healthy, emotionally available partner will make sure that you feel that reassurance, that you don't have to work so hard to find anymore.
absolutely. Yes. I do think it's kind of a paradox. The way I like to think about it is that the inner child work and, the reprogramming work helps us to recognize whether someone is emotionally available, because
Mhm.
the outer reflects the inner, as you were saying before. And then also when we have that skill of building secure attachment within ourselves, then we can ask for reassurance in a respectful way and a safe way to the other person,
Exactly.
like rather than demanding it. And so
Exactly.
it's not like we're gonna, a lot of my clients sometimes come to me and they think that healing insecure attachment means that you're never going to feel insecure. And it's like,
Yeah.
no, every human being on the planet feels insecure. The difference
Mhm.
between someone that has a secure attachment style is that when they feel insecure, they're able to say so in a way that feels safe and respectful to the other person. And
Mhm.
and so I think
Yeah.
that it sounds like you have all of those scripts in the book. So that's really wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah. I talk about it in the book, like bridge building, right? It's like sometimes, with people that have had anxious, or, coming from their backgrounds, is they were told that they were the ones responsible for creating the whole bridge. And that's why it starts to feel a little over, like it's so much responsibility because the other person's not doing their part, right? And the avoidance are just like, bridges are dumb. They don't exist. Like, I'm just not even going to put in the work, right? And
Yeah,
so,
we're like, we don't need a bridge because we're here. What's the problem? Everything's
exactly.
fine.
And
Yeah.
so then, that dynamic of the avoidant and the attached, the anxious, becomes very unbalanced. And so, recognizing that a bridge has to be built from both ends, and both people have to take turns in like passing the, whatever, the cables back and forth until they
Yeah.
have a secure bond.
I love that. Yeah. And so I know that you have a free gift for people that are interested. Maybe they want to check out your book. So do you want to? I know that you offer a free e guide that's like an intro to your book.
Yes, it's on my website, strong.love, and it should be there as a pop-up you can download. Just put in your email address and I'll send it over to you, or you can find it on the resource page as well.
Yes. Yeah. So it looks like it's an intro to the strong model, right? Like that
Mm-hmm.
people can get their feet wet, so to speak, and decide if they want to dive into the larger material. Although, since you have it in audiobook, I think that there is really not a big risk to just start listening to it because,
We've
it sounds
all got those extra Audible credits laying around, right?
exactly. I know I do. I'm like always listening to audiobooks, so I will probably download yours next because I really love your frameworks, and it sounds like you really have these practical tools, and even just the empathy squares would be great to, be able to give to my husband when he's just like, "How do I give you empathy?" And it's like, pick one of these squares.
Exactly.
So thank you so much. I think that this has been really enlightening, and very inspiring to see that, building secure attachment and creating a lasting relationship that stands the test of time can sometimes seem complex. And it sounds like, your strong model really simplifies it. So I encourage everybody to get Kristal's free e-guide and check it out. And I know that it's time to end, so I will just tell everybody that I hope that you have a self-love and beautiful love with others filled day. And until next time.